So, hey everyone, welcome back to another brand new tier list video. Hope you're all doing well today. Good to see you all. Alright, so for today's tier list video, we actually have our first co-commentator with us, the first of many, I hope. We have, and the person who was responsible for me even going down this tier list idea, so Azure Abysswalker is with us to help us with today's video. So big thank you to him for tuning in and helping out. I really appreciate it, man.
I am very happy to be here, especially because I think it was like maybe 2 months ago. I just floated the idea that, do you know what? I think I've seen tier list videos do well, and I think that you're a great creator, so you should probably give him a shot. And then he gave it a shot, and then everyone all the feedback's been very positive for what I've been seeing. So I'm glad it's working out. So happy to be here.
Yeah, here we are now, and I'm very, very grateful to you. Thank you so much. Alright, so today we're going to delve into none other than the Soulsborne series. Well, specifically Bloodborne, because when it comes to Soulsborne, I've played in Platinum Bloodborne, and I'm currently playing Elden Ring, and I own Dark Souls 1 and Dark Souls 3. Azure here is the Soulsborne aficionado. You've played, well, I think all of them except the Demon Souls remake.
I have not played the original Demon Souls or the Demon Souls remake because PS3 and PS5 exclusive, and I'm waiting for enough games on PS5 exclusive to justify buying it.
Yeah.
So those two, I have not finished Elden Ring, but I have started it. It is absolutely incredible. You're gonna have a blast when you get to it.
Oh yeah, again, I've been having a great time.
My opinion on Bloodborne, it's just around the top. I think it barely made my top 10 games. It's really good. The main issues with the only issue that I take with it is sometimes you have to farm for blood vials when you're like refighting bosses, which is very, very annoying. Yeah. But outside of that one minor nitpick, it's a phenomenal game, absolutely incredible. If you're watching this, you've probably played it, but if you haven't played it and you're curious, and you own a PlayStation, buy it. It's available for free in the PlayStation Network. This is a must-play game if you have the means to do so.
And it's regularly on sale, and secondhand it's really cheap too. And I agree, it's an absolutely fantastic game. It just barely missed out on my top 5 games of all time, because this is the only game currently on PlayStation 4 I've platinumed. I've got every achievement. I've done it back and forth. I enjoyed the game so much. It's a beautiful work of art. It's so much fun. It's super engaging. And even the creator himself, Miyazaki, said that this was his favorite game to work on. The game is just absolutely fantastic. And today we have 3 tier lists planned. It depends how many we can get through. So we've got bosses, because it's a Souls game. We have to do bosses. That's like the requirement. And then we've got weapons and locations if we get around to them. So we'll start with bosses, and we've got multiple tiers. So we've got like S tier, A tier, B tier, C tier, D tier, E tier, F tier, and Absolute God tier. We'll get to Absolute God tier, but... So to start with bosses, and being a Souls game, most of the bosses are fantastic. Granted, there's some that are kind of lazy, and there's always those ones that just piss you off depending on your playstyle, because we've all got that skill check boss that just we cannot get past for the life of us, but someone else got past it in like 2 seconds. So I think we'll start with the first boss, which is Cleric Beast, and so how this is going to work is like, I'll say my piece, Azure will say his piece, and then we'll decide on where it goes, whether our opinions match or if there's a differentiation. So for the Cleric Beast, it's a good starting boss because it really throws you for a loop in terms of like how it just pops out. The moveset's pretty simple, but if you rush it too much, you can get slammed. But if you know what you're doing, it's actually quite easy to get through. I absolutely love its design because it starts bleeding into the cosmic horror aspect, but it's not so far-fetched that it's like it feels jarring, and the music is fantastic too. So I would put it in B tier. What about you?
So that's actually where I was thinking I would place Cleric myself, because it is definitely a simpler boss in terms of moveset, but it does teach you, the player, how to handle big beast bosses. Its damage is low enough that you're not going to be, that even if it grabs you, it's not going to one-shot combo you like some grabs do in later bosses. It's basically there to tell you that for big bosses, get in close, smack its behind, and get your health back when you take hits, which is really good. The downside, one of the problems I have with the Cleric Beast though is that because for whenever I play through Old Yharnam, I end up fighting the Cleric Beast to basically end off before going back to another stream to upgrade my weapons, because I want to get the Blood Echoes and have the Doll available. So, because of that, if I don't start with the Soul Cleaver, the fight can drag a bit and just take time to get done, because the fight turns into more of an endurance fight, because you'll probably have at least 15 vials going in, and but So it's like, so that's just a minor nitpick. But so that's probably why I put it in B tier, not above, because of that aspect. But in terms of an introduction, it's very good, and I think that, and it's a good skill check in regards to, if you're not going to be able to handle the Cleric Beast, Bloodborne is not going to work out for you. Like,
yeah, and it's funny because Cleric Beast isn't even the first proper skill check.
Nope, Cleric Beast is an optional boss. It's not even required.
Yeah, it's very, very true. I also agree with you on the point where unless you have a certain weapon, it can think. Because again, if you try and fight this thing with the threaded cane, it takes forever.
That was, yeah, that's what I was referring to. The last time I did a cane start run, this fight took me about 7 minutes.
Yeah.
I was like, oh my god.
And like, the threaded cane has a serrated mode, but the serrated mode is much slower and does less damage. It's more for area control. Okay. Alright, so we agree that B tier for Cleric Beast. Yeah.
Yeah, we definitely can agree with that.
Okay.
And trust me, I have a full discussion about the cane, because the cane is a weapon I'm very opinionated about.
Well, we'll get to that. Okay, so
when we get to that later. When we get to that.
So also, just to let you know, we're also doing DLC bosses and specifically dungeon exclusive bosses, because in the dungeon, some of the bosses are just upscaled enemies. We're ignoring those because they're upscaled enemies. It doesn't matter. But we do have actual dungeon bosses. But for the next boss, let's go with the Amygdala. I personally, this is just a regular Amygdala, not the cursed one. Fuck that thing, I hate it. I personally put Amygdala in C because Amygdala, also when it comes to boss, it's not just about the fight, but also maybe the lore, the music, and all that stuff. The Amygdalas, I love the design of them. Very Cthulhu-esque, very interesting looking, and he rips off his arms to try and fight you, so that's really cool. But the fight itself is kind of piss easy because he staggers easily. He doesn't have that many attacks that do significant damage despite the reach. And yeah, again, and it's towards the end game, and the area you have to get through is harder than the actual boss fight. So I personally put Amygdala in C, but what do you think?
Again, I think I'm about the same agreement as you, especially because you have the ability to, especially with the sheer weakness on the head. When you realize that the head takes the most damage, literally all you need to do is backstep when it drops, hit the head, pull back, dodge, and every time he goes to do the jump attack, you have a free you end up with a free window. So it makes the fight kind of I wouldn't necessarily call it easy because you can still get punished, especially in the version where you have half your HP. Fuck the Defiled dungeon.
Seriously, that boss has killed me more than any other boss in the game, and that includes the Defiled Watchdog, which for many is the worst.
Yeah, so we're talking about the normal one here, but basically, if that one's in consideration, that one is probably that version is further down because it's just it's the same fight with the same thing, but if you get hit by anything, you're probably gonna die. So that's pretty bad.
Yeah.
So Amygdala C. I can live with that.
All right. Okay. So next boss, let's Dark Beast Paarl. This is an interesting one because Paarl is a case of it depends on when you're fighting and what build you're running. Because the design is cool. It's like it's essentially a skeletal Raikou from Pokemon. And it's quite interesting looking boss. If you have a strength build, like a really high strength weapon and a high strength build, Paarl is piss. If you're running more skill and you haven't like maxed out really high levels and you go to him early, Paarl will desecrate you so much. He will like beat you to a bloody pulp and he'll be like, for some players, they just quit because it's too much. I think Paarl's interesting in that regard, but the boss overall I put in C tier as well.
Yeah, the biggest problem with Paarl is the camera. It's a case where if you lock on, you can't see anything, and I feel like I spent more time learning how to keep an eye on him with my left stick than I actually did fighting him, because there's two ways you go about it. Either you smash his limbs with the strength that you mentioned, because you pass the DPS check and he falls over and the fight's easy, or if you're doing it the hard way, he's a very fast beast boss. You just like keep your eye on the camera. And I don't like being reminded of Mario 64, where the camera's the enemy.
Oh god. Yeah, there are some bosses in Bloodborne like that. Usually the big beast bosses where the camera is actually, it's better to not lock on. I found that was really useful against Ebrietas. Because if you try locking on, it just doesn't work. You don't have the freedom of movement.
Absolutely.
Okay, so next up, alright, here's one. Micolash, the host of the nightmare. Okay, Micolash, the boss fight itself is absolute shit because all he does is run around. He has the Augur of Ebrietas attack, which again, it's easy to dodge. And for the most part, he's a piss easy boss, but then he has a cool beyond, which is a giant AoE, which can potentially one-shot you, and it's really, really annoying. But the lore surrounding the fight with all the stuff regarding Kos and the atmosphere is fantastic. So I don't think it's the worst fight. I think from a gameplay standpoint, it's probably the worst fight in the game, but in terms of atmosphere and story implications, it's really good. So I would put it in D tier, but what about you?
That's a rough one, because I will admit, because his voice acting and character actually fit the fight, because he's a sniveling coward who keeps running away from you, but it's not fun. It's not fun trying to chase him down, and when you do corner him, if you know how to deal with a call beyond, because you can stagger him out of it or you get close, it doesn't kill you. If you don't know what you're doing and you're far away, you're going to get one shot your first time you fight him no matter what. Which is bad design, because you have to chase him around for 5 minutes again, which is annoying. So I would basically lean, if he's in D tier, I can think of 2 bosses I could put below. So I can live with that, because I think that we have a spot for E and F tier respectively. So I can live with D tier Micolash, if you factor in the fact that he actually is an interesting attack. Like, from a writing standpoint, he's interesting.
He is. Very, very much so.
But if you take the dialogue out of it,
okay, yeah. If you took it,
I agree D tier. But if he didn't talk, F tier.
Absolutely. Okay, let's do a Chalice Dungeon boss, the Undead Giant. So the Undead Giant comes in various forms. There's one with a club, one with a cannon, and one with a giant blade or something, and balls on the back. They're okay bosses. They're very slow, but they've got range and they've got a ridiculously high DPS. They're very much a case of you have to go a lot of back and forth, and if you've got dodging down good, they're not that difficult. They're also interesting because their bodies are covered in pulsating flesh, and if you cut those bits, they stagger massively and take a huge chunk of health off. So they're bosses that are easy to work around, but if you make one mistake, you're pretty much dead. So I think they're fine. They're not that interesting, but I put them in C tier. What about you?
C tier. They weren't particularly too memorable. The ones with the ball and chain when he does the sweep around, that was the most threatening when I ran the chalices. So an overall good, respectable challenge. Not exactly the most memorable, but definitely a fight that isn't terrible. So
okay, C tier it is. All right, now that we've done a Chalice Dungeon boss, let's do one of the DLC bosses. Let's just do one. Let's do the Living Failures. Living Failures, I would put in E tier because for DLC bosses, they're extremely underwhelming. They're essentially the Celestial Emissaries again. While they can hurt, they're really easy to work around. They have this one significant attack which can be blocked just by standing still in one particular area, and the lore behind them isn't that interesting too. They literally serve as a small little thing right before you fight the main final boss. Granted, the area is quite nice. Well, the main boss of that area, not the main final boss, sorry. The area is quite nice, but aside from that, they're just there, and for DLC, that's really underwhelming. If they were main game bosses, I could see them being a bit better, but for a DLC boss, I'm just no.
Yeah, so the Living Failures live up to their name because they don't need to be there. If they literally do not need to be in that area. They honestly don't add much to the research hall because the research hall is terrifying enough, as we'll discuss later, and also, the only reason why they're not F tier for me is the music. Holy fuck, is their theme incredible? It's something that I could see happening while a Sith Lord is dropping a planet on you. It's one of those things that it's so good that it doesn't fit the boss. Outside of the section, they start raining comments, but you can just show them. You literally can just stand by the tree and you just fine. So it's underwhelming in the fact that it doesn't even live up to the music. And because the fight is so underwhelming, a lot of people don't even know about the song.
Yeah, again, I completely forgot about the song because again, you just don't focus on. You're just so uninvested in the fight.
So Living Failures definitely E tier because the music is the reason why they're above F, but they still disappoint me for not living up to the song.
So now there's a boss that I'm split on in terms of tiering. Martyr Logarius, because Martyr Logarius, the lore behind him is great, especially if you do Alfred's quest line. It's really, really cool in that regard. The fight itself is a really awesome fight that teaches you that you have to be close and aggressive in Bloodborne, because one of the main things that people struggled with going from Souls to Bloodborne is that in Dark Souls you can be a bit more defensive and a bit slow and fighting, and you can be a bit keep a distance a bit more. In Bloodborne, no, you have to get close, you have to be aggressive, and this fight teaches you that the hard way. It's a really cool fight with blood magic, and Logarius himself, he scales nicely along with the fight. Granted, there's this one thing that's, if you don't do this certain trick, he becomes a bit of a pain in the ass to fight, where if you don't stagger him before he does his power-up, you can't riposte him, which is really annoying, but if you do, the fight's fine. But Logarius is just an awesome, and again, you're fighting on like a frozen castle rooftop, which is amazing. So I'm kind of divided between A or S tier. What do you think, though?
I personally vote A. And my logic behind this is first off with the introduction, it's one of the best boss cutscenes in the entire game. Like, the fact that he's slowly, like, you can feel the fingers snapping as he breaks free of the ice and just saunters towards you, gaining his composure with the big scythe. It's terrifying! Like, you can tell that, it's a terrifying sight, and then he lives up to it, like in the actual fight itself. There are three things about the fight that I think keep out of S tier for me. The first, the run back is one of the worst of Bloodborne. Yeah. Why isn't there a lamp outside?
Yeah, it takes a while because you've got to go past multiple rooftops.
Yeah, you have to go past multiple rooftops, and the run back takes about 2 minutes, which is one of the longest in the series. Yeah, I will always count a bad run back up against.
Yeah, I was just actually can I just build upon that, because a bit people are thinking 2 minutes doesn't sound that bad. In a Souls game, 2 minutes is everything.
Mm-hmm. Because also, because they could just have put a second elevator there. They could have put a second elevator that drops down right from the tower base that didn't need a second lamp to warp to. That's the first one. The second issue is, like you said, he gains super armor if you don't stagger him behind, and yeah, I like the idea that I think being able to stagger him and do the riposte like when he's buffing, that is enough of an advantage for the player. You shouldn't be punished for not doing it.
Yeah, because...
And then third, if you don't know to shoot his sword when he drops it, he starts raining all of the swords on you, and you have no idea what you're doing. So, and with the wrong run back, it can get a little frustrating. So when I first played him, I wasn't the biggest fan, but upon replays, I think it's an awesome fight. It's just with that knowledge, it's one of those fights that gets better when you fight him again after you know those tricks. So that's why I think A tier overall, because I think that there's just a couple flaws that keep him out of S, but definitely the best boss.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, so now we've got one that's quite interesting. The Shadows of Yharnam. So this is like Bloodborne's, the Souls traditional gank battle. For those who don't know, gank is like when you're teamed up by 3 other player hunter characters and you've got to fight them all at once. And Souls has been known to be quite notorious that ganks are really difficult in Souls because the games are often not designed around them. But in the case of the Shadows of Yharnam, while they can be frustrating, the snake attacks are the worst, because those things feel like a cheap, like, desperation attack which can one-shot you and really hard to avoid. But they're designed really cleverly, where they each have different perks. The first one is pure melee, the second one is melee and fire, and the third one's pure fire. And each of them, and so you can exploit one of their weaknesses, but it won't work on the other one, and vice versa, and this, that, and the other. So it's a really good way to manage things. And aside from the melee one, when he unlocks the snake form and he has the stretchy limbs, they're pretty easy to manage and work around. And if you actually exploit their AI, they become an absolute joke. I think they're a solid gank fight. I put them in B. The only thing I can't stand is literally when they summon the snake attacks. Those I think are a bit cheap.
Yeah, the snake attacks lower them from A to B for me. One thing I have to praise about the fight is the arena. There are enough obstacles in the arena to easily isolate because it's a fight where instead of Bloodborne being sheer aggression all the time, it's more you have to basically be calculating. If you isolate one and then go all in and then do like half its health bar and then retreat because there's a giant gravestone in the middle and corners where you can box him in and get free windows. So it's very enjoyable. It's a fight that if it wasn't just a flat plane with like nothing to break up aggro, the fight would be terrible. So the arena honestly makes the fight. So I have to and you covered everything else. So yeah, solid fight, definitely. Yeah, B tier. I haven't done a Blood Level 4 run, which is the hardest challenge run you can basically do in Bloodborne. But apparently that's apparently the Shadows of Yharnam are the first big difficulty jump from a normal run. Because that's when all their strong attacks can one shot.
Yeah, and again the melee dude, when he stretches, it's so easy to get hit by him.
Yeah, so that was just one of the extra thing I'd like to note about.
Okay, so now we have. Okay, so you know how I said that the bosses in the Chalice dungeons were meant to be exclusive Chalice dungeons? There is one exception: the Beast Possessed Soul. You can actually fight him if you head down from the entry to Upper Cathedral Ward. If you head all the way down to the bottom and down like towards the back of the Cathedral Ward, you can fight this thing. This boss is kind of pathetic. He's meant to be like a wolfing with a bit more magic and fire attacks, but he's slower than the wolves. He's got a bit more HP, but the fire attacks aren't anything special. I mean, the ram horns are kind of cool, but aside from that, he's literally just like he's essentially just a normal enemy. So I'd put him in F tier. I think it's ridiculous.
Yep, F tier along with all of the normal enemies that they put in Chalice bosses. There's a pig. Literally, one of the pig enemies is the boss in the Chalice dungeons. I'm sorry, but no.
Yeah, there's a pig, there's a brain sucker, there's a Laurent thingy beast. It's oh god, I hate when Bloodborne does that. This game's a piece of shit. Don't buy it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Right. Okay. So, all right. This boss. Oh, this boss. The Blood-Starved Beast. Now, in Souls games, everyone has that boss that they just really struggle with. This was my one. When I first played it, I could not get past him for the life of me, because while he is one of the most exploitable bosses ever, he's also one of the most aggressive and difficult for early players, because he's really fast, he spews poison, and just like all the stuff like that. But the boss itself, in terms of design, not only does it look amazing, again, it looks like, I think someone pulled it else, he looks like he sneezed so hard his entire insides got shat out of his ass. And, yeah, because that's what it looks like. It's like, oh god, or they call them skin flaps. And, like, the fight is cool. It's an interesting beast fight where he's incredibly aggressive, but if you know how to use the aggression against it, like, you can riposte it, you can throw the blood cocktails, he's weak to fire, all that stuff. It actually is a pretty cool battle. These days, I'd actually put it in B tier, but what do you think? Because it can be really overwhelming.
This is hard. And I mean this because it's a case where where I just think it's a little overtuned in terms of aggression, because for a new player, it's probably going to be one of the least favorite bosses, like you said, because it's the name, the Blood-Starved Beast, is a hint. If you throw blood cocktails, you can distract it, get off, and get 3 hits in. And it also has a weakness to fire. So if you have the flame sprayer, and like get it to +3, you can do obscene damage with it if you combo that with oil. But those are like advanced tricks you do to avoid dealing with the bullshit on further runs. So, but I do I can't believe I'm agreeing with you, but yes, I can agree with B tier in retrospect. From what the fight is as a veteran, it's B tier. And then in your first time through, if you need to look up a guide to help test to deal with the Blood-Starved Beast,
it can be a pain in the ass.
Because it's not easy. It has one move that is...
So I was going to say, in that case, do you want to put it... Because you said it's B tier for veterans, but I'd say it's like D tier for newbies, so put it in C?
Yeah, I can agree with C then. Because I can definitely agree with C. Because it has one attack that is fucking bullshit. Because it has this grab that you basically... Big range, you need... In the final phase, you need to parry it. Otherwise, because if it grabs you, it just bites your neck in one shot any character that doesn't have vitality.
And another thing that really...
And so depending on your build...
Yeah, and another thing that's really annoying in the last phase is that... Because usually the Blood-Starved Beast has to attack you to poison you or start poison. This one, he literally just secretes it. So if you get close, you just naturally get poisoned, and that's really annoying.
It goes against Bloodborne's philosophy, where you're encouraged to stay away and try to attack it slowly because of the poison, but that goes against the gameplay of Bloodborne. So I'm not a fan of the whole poison.
Okay, now, okay, this is an interesting one. Rom, the Vacuous Spider. Now, Rom is a boss that, again, I find it's very dependent on the player because it's very RNG based in terms of their attacks. Rom is in a beautiful arena. The lore is some of the best in the game, and Rom is a big part of Bloodborne's, like, story and so on. The fight itself doesn't have much to it. You just got to fight this giant boulder with a bunch of spiders, but the spiders are really powerful if you don't watch out for them, and depending on what Rom does, the fight can either be a piece of piss or unbearably frustrating. I would put it in C because, again, the fight feels RNG based, but the lore and the atmosphere are just unbelievable.
Lean towards D. I do not like Rom. My thing with Rom is, from a lore standpoint, I think Rom is very phenomenal and a good gameplay tool. My issue is I'm not a fan of bosses that make you fight a ton of random enemies to get to the main boss. Because the problem is that in the third phase, it starts firing magic AoEs at you, and the spiders do a lot of damage. I found the time they two-shot me. So it's like one of those cases where whenever I win, I don't feel the satisfaction of winning. I feel the sigh of, whew, it's over.
I see what you mean.
and that is a sign that I'm not a fan. But so either bottom of C or top of D. It's definitely better than Micolash, but it reminds me of Micolash in the respect that the lore in the arena definitely up the ante, and then the actual gameplay is just it's just they're fighting a bunch of spiders is a very common trope.
Yeah, I mean, because spiders make for a common enemy. You know what? I'll agree with you top of D, because they love to spam ROM in the Chalice dungeons, and it's just as annoying to fight there. And there's no lore and beautiful atmosphere this time.
Yep. Oh, Chalice ROM. Oh. Yeah. That's how I feel about that.
Keeper of the Old Lords. Keeper of the Old Lords is pretty much just a hunter NPC. In fact, you fight some of them as just hunter NPCs. It's got some cool fire attacks, and sometimes they bring dogs, but that's about it. I like the design, like kind of scarecrowish, but aside from that, I put it in E tier. I don't think it's as bad as Beast Possessed Soul, but it's nothing special.
I agree with E tier, especially because the thing that elevates above the standard enemy trope is that the one in the Defiled dungeon is actually is a very big challenge because of the difficulty where it can kill you with half of its moves because of the half health. It's not as hard as the notorious Chalice bosses in that one, but it's still not easy. So it's that version is what I remember. So yeah, I can agree with E tier because at the end of the day, it literally is just like a regular enemy as a boss, but that fight at least keeps you on your toes.
Father Gascoigne. Now this is where most Bloodborne players stop the game. It's too much to handle. This boss is too difficult. For me, I put this boss in A tier. It's like, on the first time round, it is the best way to learn about Bloodborne's mechanics. The aggression, the parrying, using the environment against you, how to fight hunter NPCs. The lore is great because if you actually explore around Yharnam, the whole game builds up to, well, first of all, Yharnam's one of the best first levels ever, but the whole thing, like all the interactions you have built up to Gascoigne, and it tells you his story. And then, like, you can, if you get the music box, you can help fight against him. And also, just watching Gascoigne, what he goes through, it's a really good tell of what happens to hunters without going over into the lore about how, like, you know, those who become hunters are destined to, like, succumb to the blood and the beast hunger. Yeah, Gascoigne can be really difficult at first, but actually, when you fight him over and over again, he's not that hard. And the music, Gascoigne's song is so... God. Seriously, the music in this fight, so I put in A tier. What about you?
I honestly love Gascoigne to the point that so for your absolute god tier, are you only thinking of one fight in particular for that, or are there multiple candidates?
Yeah, maybe one, maybe two, but definitely one in particular.
Okay. In that case, I can agree with the top of A, because I agree there are bosses that are definitely like on an echelon above. So so the other thing with Gascoigne is, God, this story is fucking depressing, and it's brilliantly told, because you don't know, because when first time you play through, you're probably not going to find his daughter, you're probably not going to know anything, you're just going to think, oh, this guy's really hard, but when you find the daughter, say, oh, find my mom's brooch, and find my dad, he went out to hunt beasts, and then you see a woman with a red jeweled brooch who's dead above the arena, and he's just chopping away at corpses, you can put two and two together, and it's really depressing.
And you can use that music box to actually exploit the boss and make it easier, and the story continues after that if you give the brooch back, and the girl has a very unfortunate ending, because Bloodborne just, literally, unless your name is the doll, everyone has a shit ending in Bloodborne.
Yep, basically. The Chapel Dweller, I think, can make it, but that's about it.
Okay. He's actually quite nice, the Chapel Dweller.
Yeah, I think that because of the essence and the aromas he puts up, like the people who go there, who go crazy, because since the people who go there, who go crazy, just leave, he kind of just ends up okay no matter what. But yeah, basically him and the doll are the only two who make it out there with a semblance of sanity.
Yeah. But yeah, so Gascoigne top of A tier.
Yep, top of A tier.
Okay. Yeah. Alright. So, let's go with another DLC boss. Laurence the First Vicar. Now, Laurence for some, by look of it, it's basically the Cleric Beast on fire, and he's got a lot of the Cleric Beast moves. The only difference is that he's got ridiculous amounts of HP. During the second half of the fight, he literally yeets his bottom half and starts spewing lava and crawling around, and his damage output is absolutely fucking ridiculous. Now, the fact that this is Laurence is cool, because Laurence was the one who founded the Healing Church, so that's really interesting. But the boss fight itself, it's essentially the Cleric Beast again, if the Cleric Beast was an ass. So, I personally put Laurence, I mean, granted that, the music and stuff is really, really cool, but the fight itself, I put it in D, but what do you think?
I feel like I have Stockholm Syndrome with Laurence. I hate the fight. It's bullshit. But every time as a point of pride, I need to fight him and beat him in every playthrough. I need the satisfaction of overcoming the challenge, even though at the end of the day, it is from Sov making the mistake again of having a flaming reskin of the opening boss, and then just pumping up the health, and then because by adding a second phase, it's like, oh, they're changing it. That's good. The second phase is a clusterfuck. Like there's literally only one way to approach Laurence in that phase, which is from the right side, and I don't like that. I don't like making everything lava, so you have only one way to fight. So, but at the same time, there is the lore with Laurence, and there is a major satisfaction when you finally beat him, because in terms of the most difficult bosses in Bloodborne, I personally put Laurence at number 2. The number 1 we'll be discussing later, and even above the defiled bosses, because of so that rush of winning is good. So I can agree. Going into this, I was probably going to say, "Oh, fuck Laurence F tier," but in retrospect, I think D's fitting because it does have
the funny thing
positive. It's not a waste. It's not like it's not like the horned doggo who's just no.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's funny about Laurence because if they scaled his HP down, he probably wouldn't be that bad because his moveset's actually really easy to work around. It's the fact that he does so much damage and he has so much HP. It's a numbers battle. It's less a case of skill. It's more that Laurence just has ridiculous numbers.
Indeed.
Okay. Right, so now we've got 2 bosses that kind of follow on each other. The first one is none other than Gehrman, the first hunter. So Gehrman is the old guy you talk to in the hunter's dream, and when you go to the end of the game, if you refuse his request to die and be free from the dream, he'll get up out of his wheelchair, pull out his scythe, and fight you in a beautiful, moonlit, petal-filled battlefield. The fight itself is really epic, because again, you're fighting Gehrman, and he's like and he was the first hunter, so he's really skilled in that regard. He's got some really awesome moves, and just like the fact that you're fighting your mentor, it's got this really, really epic vibe to it. I will say, because he's surprisingly, I know some people have struggled. I've never lost to Gehrman just because, well, when it comes to Bloodborne, when it comes to boss fights, I'm better at PvP than I am against player versus beast. So I don't find Gehrman too difficult. But just everything else about the fight is so amazing. I personally would put him in the S tier.
So this is your list, and you have your gods. So for the sake of that, I will relent and give you S tier. Gehrman is my favorite boss in Bloodborne. My top 3 is basically so absurdly close that it's razor thin margins, in my opinion, fluctuate. But right now, Gehrman's my favorite because he didn't need the absurd quality of the Hold Hunters DLC to shine. He was in the main game, he was this good, and it's also the fact that it's the pinnacle of tragedy because all of Gehrman's problems are self-inflicted, but the tragedy is you, the player, are refusing his request to die and be severed from the dream. you decide that no, I'm going to free you from your contract. That because you realize that he's the real prisoner, and he's fighting to save you from his fate. So it's two people.
He's trying to help you.
Desperately trying to help the other, locked effectively in eternal struggle until one dies. And that story for me is because that Edge plus Foot is my favorite song in the entire soundtrack, which is Gehrman's theme. When the chorus kicks in, also the other thing, this fight is anime as hell. The dude,
with the battlefield and everything.
As the guy, he gets out of his wheelchair, stands at you, has this thing that has an action shot that is straight out of Berserk with the two people looking at each other in the even field, and then later on in the fight he powers up, and then he just goes Super Saiyan Blue, and he just gets a blue aura and starts throwing wind at you, and literally, it's so good.
Yeah, in the whole fight he goes Super Saiyan, releases his Bankai, and does the whole Berserk stance.
Basically,
anime as fun. All right. After hearing that, I could see God tier again for me. I only didn't put in because I think personally, because I just got lucky, because everyone went on about he's really hard, and I haven't had that, but that's more to do with my preference when it comes to fighting things, because I'm the same with Lady Maria. I don't find it that hard, but at the same time, I struggle with beast bosses. But I'll put him in God tier, because what you said with the story going in, and just the anime as fuck stuff, yeah.
Yeah, well, and the other thing about Gehrman, that typical thing is, I've only ever died a couple times as well, but sometimes it's not about having a boss that is going to destroy you. Sometimes it's about a fight that just leaves you breathless.
Oh yeah.
Either way, because even so, the fights there's always a close call with him. Every time I fight him, there's always a moment where especially because his moveset with the burial blade is very intricate. So, yeah. I'm glad I'm glad I convinced you.
Yes, you did a wonderful job. And now for many people, the most disappointing part of the whole game, because how do you top a fight like Gehrman? You don't. Because if you get the full ending, the Moon Presence comes down, tries to possess you, and fails. So you have to fight the Moon Presence. Now, the design of the Moon Presence, I love. It's very bestial, but cosmic horror. I love it's Cthulhian. I love the look of it and stuff like that. How's the boss fight? I can't tell you, because not only does it have a really unmemorable moveset, it's piss easy, and all it has that stands out is this one attack which reduces 1 HP, but it has so long to recharge you can get all that HP back. Again, this fight, not only have I never lost to it, I don't even remember the moveset. All the bosses I've remembered, and that's the whole point of Souls, you remember their moves, you understand their patterns. Every time I fight the Moon Presence, I was like, what does it do again? Because it's so boring and unmemorable. I don't think it's the worst boss in the game, but it's more so, I say D tier for disappointment. It's just really disappointing, because if this was a boss at another point in the game, even in the mid-game, it'd be kind of cool. But to have it come right after Gehrman? No.
So there is one memorable part of the fight that I do think I should shout out, and that is what it attempts to do with its moveset, because it has a move where it rains blood, and then that makes it so you can't use blood vials for a time, and then it has a move where it does a shockwave that lowers you to 1 HP.
Yeah, I know that one.
However, you have a rally mechanic, so it doesn't matter, because it just encourages to rail on it. But the fact that it's trying to combo you that way, I give it some mild respect points for. But and the one other thing that I think keeps him out of the absolute lowest of the low is the fact that the boss theme, it's so threatening, and you think, oh, it doesn't fit because you're winning. The boss theme is your theme. You are the threat.
Yeah.
You are suddenly more powerful than a great one, and you are destroying it.
Yeah, that's the thing.
That is a cool aspect. That is the one aspect of the fight that I like.
Yeah.
The only aspect is
I was going to build on that, because the cinematography in the fight, the way it comes down, Michelangelo's, the Sistine Chapel thing, it's like God, the god of this realm, the way it's shot, and when it goes to you and tries to possess you, and it gets scared of you, and that's why you said you're the enemy, the cinematography in the cutscene is so beautiful.
Absolutely. So yes, I can agree with D tier because it is disappointing, but it does have some good aspects to it that keeps it above the the living failures at minimum.
Yeah, okay, so speaking of living failures, now we've got, for many, what they consider the worst boss in the game, the Witch, or Witches specifically, of Hemwick. Now, the Witches of Hemwick, the whole idea about them is that they're a misleading boss, because when you go into the arena, you fight these weird Tim Burton-style Mad One monsters. But the whole thing is you're actually meant to fight the Witches. The Witches can barely fight back. They mostly just go around the arena going invisible. They do have some attacks, but for the most part, the fighters just walk around and slice them, because the Mad Ones, unless you aggro them or actively attack them, they'll walk really slowly and they're really easy to dodge. And the fight is mostly boring, and there's a trick. If you go into the fight, use the Hunter's Mask to get out the fight, go back with 0 insight, the Mad Ones don't spawn, and you can just wail on the Witches. They're an absolutely pathetic boss. Like, they could be cool. Like, if the Mad Ones were more active and the Witches had more attacks, then you've really got to micromanage. It could be like a gank fight. But as far as I'm concerned, yeah, they suck. They just suck.
Open up with what? With 2 words. F tier.
Yeah.
This boss is... It's attempting to be something creepy when it just feels underwhelming. And it's a shame, because they're air quotes optional, but the item they guard is so important that they're required on every run. So you can't even avoid the fight. It's also the fact that like the whole invisibility mechanic. If you take too long trying to find the one witch after killing one, she'll bring the other witch back in half health. It's so dumb. It's so stupid, and I'm just like, can you not have invisible bosses, please?
Yeah, again, please.
That's all I have to say about it.
Okay, alright, so F tier.
F tier.
Right, so I think there's another boss who I think we'll agree is also F tier. Celestial Emissaries. They're the blue goobers. There's just a whole farm of them, and literally all you do is you find the one goober, you knock him about, eventually he'll turn big, and you just fight him there. Literally, this boss serves no other purpose than a small, like literally to unlock a lamppost before you can fight Ebrietas and after you've done the creepiest part of the game. But the Celestial Emissaries, they're normal enemies, there's a lot of them, and one of them's big. To some, they're even worse than the Witches. The living failures are them done right, and even they suck.
If the living failures are E, Emissary must be
yes.
F. That's all I have to say. The Emissary is the far worse version, because at least the living failures do have a big health pool. They're tied together, and they do hit hard if they actually hit you. These guys, they're no threat at all. Just cunt. Yeah. Go in, hunt. 10 seconds later, done.
Absolutely. Ugh. They're literally just a small appetizer, and not a good one at that. All right, now for another dungeon boss. The Pthumerian Descendant. I like the look of him. Kind of got like the whole slightly hunter but more Canehurst vibe to him. The Descendant's primarily an R1 spammer, so if you're good at PvP fights, you've got a good gun, he's quite easy to exploit. He can be kind of annoying with his boomerang attack, but he makes for a decent boss. I'd say he's just a solid fight overall. Nothing amazing, nothing bad, just a solid fight. I'd say C tier.
I kind of would put him in B tier, mainly just because it's one of the challenge bosses that I thought was worth my time fighting. Because and I had it definitely below Shadows of Yharnam and Cleric beefs on the tier list, but I think I prefer him to Amygdala. I don't know. I think it's just one of those things where it's refreshing after playing Bloodborne for so long to face an enemy that is completely new, and also seeing like the more of what the Pthumerians look like. I think. I don't know. It's all because I do agree. It's been one R1 spammer, but you have a counter for that parry, because unlike in Souls, gun parrying is actually reliable.
Absolutely. How about high C tier?
Yeah, I can live with
high
that.
C tier.
Yeah, but definitely above A.
Okay. Sure. Alright, here's a boss I really don't know what to do. Mergo's Wet Nurse. Alright, I love the way Mergo's Wet Nurse looks. You know, this caped raven type thing with 6 arms a la like Sinbad and Koloktos. So that's amazing. The music with the music box and like the baby crying, that's really cool. The boss fight, it's got like, the shadow duplicate can be kind of threatening. She does the spin attack, it one-shots you, but Mergo is so slow, and half the time you just gotta kind of just like, the fight itself just kind of, again, it's not very exciting, because all she does is kind of casually walk towards you and do some really slow attacks. Again, if you get cocky, she can absolutely decimate you, but for the most part, while the atmosphere is kind of cool and stuff like that, the boss fight is just so I have, honestly got no idea where to put her.
So the main thing with Mergo that I think that we need to keep in mind is, in the majority of the runs that we do, we're fighting Mergo after the DLC, because Mergo is the last main game boss that unlocks the Gehrman fight. So, and is technically one of the final bosses if you go with the easy out ending. So, because of that, you always go in there over leveled because if you beat all the DLC bosses, you are going to you are over prepared for this fight. Also, I think it's another reason why Gehrman we don't have no trouble with Gehrman. After the DLC, we're basically an equal with Gehrman at that point. But I just had that thought. But with this fight, honestly, I kind of enjoy it. It's one of those things where I just like the horror. It feels like definitely a horror boss, and while like the actual like combat loop isn't really there, you just get behind it. Just don't get if it starts slicing you, you're gonna die. So like So you're not going to agree with me at all on this, but I actually in my list I put him in B.
No, I think B is fine. Because I wouldn't put it in A, as high as A, but B is fine.
It reminds me of because also like with the lore, it reminds me of the Formless Awaited and the fact that like it is a cloak.
Yeah, again, I love that. I love the way it's designed. You don't know what exactly it looks like.
So from a lore standpoint, it's also I just got to thank Bloodborne for the fact that like you beat it, that you defeat the wet nurse. You don't actually have to hunt the baby.
Yeah,
that would have been really weird and creepy. So I'm glad at least you did. I'm glad at least that like by you take care of the problem by getting rid of the
baby. You can get enough of up on this. Now we have the last Chalice dungeon boss, the Yharnam Queen. The Yharnam Queen is a hassle to get to, but she's one of the most interesting characters just because of all the lore surrounding her and everything building up to the Queen. And the fight itself, obviously there's a beautiful contrast where she's in this like white veil, beautiful pure gown, and she's just covered in blood and everything, and she looks like skeletal. The fight itself is okay. Like, again, she's not pure just like blood spam, she does have melee attacks, but there is this annoying mechanic where if Mergo starts crying too much, you get trapped a bit. The fight itself is alright, but again, it's a hassle to get to her. And again, it's more of a lore fight if anything, but it's not bad. I'd say either C or B.
I think I'd put it above the Descendant because there's one aspect to Yharnam you didn't cover, and that is if you are fighting Yharnam, that means you're going for platinum.
Yes.
Which means the satisfaction of beating Yharnam is the platinum trophy, and the satisfaction of thank God I never have to do the chalice run again. Mm-hmm. So with that satisfaction, that pushes her to B for me because as you said, the attacks are interesting. The freezing mechanic is annoying with like when the baby starts crying. I don't like that. That's why the fight is never going above that. But it's more. It feels like a victory lap in a way.
Yeah.
Because not only do you need to get all the weapons, you have to see all the endings. You also need to do all the chalices. So that's why platinuming is so hard.
Yeah. All right. So yeah, both B's here. Okay. Cool. All right. Alright, so now for the next boss. Now, this is one of the most infamous bosses for outsiders to Bloodborne because of its design, the One Reborn, which is, it's this giant mess of, whatever it is. It's a failed attempt to make a great one, and it's an absolute cosmic horror because it's just a bunch of bodies stuck together. As for the fight, it takes from Dark Souls' Bell Maiden's idea, where there's these witches on the top that will heal the boss unless you take them out. So you go up top, you fight them, you take them out, then you fight the One Reborn. The One Reborn is just random. Again, you can't tell what its appendages are because it's literally everywhere. It has some random ass attacks that range from raining bodies from the sky, spewing acid, and so on. Honest to God, I put the fight in either C or D because while it's a grotesque spectacle, and I like the idea of like they tried to make a great one and it failed, the fight itself isn't that interesting. The fight itself isn't that interesting.
Do you know what the boss reminds me of? It reminds me of, I think the name is Legion from
Castlevania.
From Symphony of the Night. It reminds me a lot of that, and it's just in HD. And it's grotesque and terrifying. However, the biggest flaw for me is the Bell Maidens thing. Basically means that the flow of the fight is either slow because you just go up there, slowly kill them all, then just wail on them and it's easy, or you get super aggressive and try to beat the fight before the maidens kill you.
Yeah.
So either way, it's like one of those things where unless you're going for the adrenaline junkie challenge rush, it's not fun. So, and also half the attacks I don't even understand.
I don't.
I just get hit. I'm just like, why am I taking damage right now? I don't understand. So, yeah, somewhere between C and D tier, at the bottom of D.
I'll put it. I'll be generous and put it at the bottom of C.
Yeah,
I'll be generous.
That is you being very generous.
So back to the DLC. Let's tackle the final DLC boss, the hardest boss for what many consider the hardest boss in all Souls series, the Orphan of Kos. Now, the Orphan of Kos is a really tragic story of like the child of Kos, and Kos was a mutilated great one, and is the reason that Bloodborne went to shit, because the people that went there did all these experiments. Kos made a curse, and it's just like, it's humanity being their worst, and the Orphan just comes out, it's like this shriveled, disgusting freak of a thing, but when it fights you, it's got this giant placenta, it's uber aggressive, it's on this like this really decrepit shoreline, and just it's the most aggressive, ridiculous boss in the game, despite the fact it has many exploits like riposting. Again, the fact that the hardest boss in the game can be riposted, and riposting can make a biggest difference in a fight, goes to show how hard it is. And while the fight itself is really difficult, the adrenaline rush is beyond anything. When you're at that last sliver of health, he's going nuts with the lightning, the placenta, throwing the shrimp everywhere. Oh, it's undescribable, like, the experience you have fighting Kos. It's really difficult. Again, that's the point. It's extremely difficult. But the actual satisfaction of beating him is... you take it from here.
Yeah, you covered the majority of my thoughts already. I feel like if Orphan of Kos had a slogan, it would be aggressive. Just be aggressive. And albeit, so the first phase, when you can parry, honestly, if you're good at parrying it, isn't that bad. The second phase, if it gets to the second phase, that's when all bets are off, and you're just struggling for survival. I personally think that Orphan should be our first entry into S tier, because while it's not my favorite fight, because the difficulty is just so high that like the high you get off from fighting is great. There's just a couple other fights that I enjoy more. Orphan is just a phenomenal example of how good the DLC is.
Yes, I agree with S tier. All right. Okay, so now we've got a boss that a lot of people hate, the Watchdog of the Old Laws. Now, the main reason people hate him is because you usually fight the Watchdog in the Defiled Chalice dungeon, which is where you have half your health, and because he's a fire boss with high DPS, one shot, pretty much each of his attacks is one shot. The Watchdog, it's a fine beast boss. It's actually not that difficult to work around. It's just that its attacks have a lot of range, and they often, like, because again, it does like multiple biting attacks. But if you have, I'll tell you right now, if you've got specifically which is the weapon? The Whirligig Saw. If you have a high strength weapon that's serrated, the Watchdog literally falls to pieces around you, but if not, it can be a bit of a pain in the ass. I think it's around D tier. I don't think it's the worst boss in the game because it has a unique design and fight, but it can be really frustrating. I put it in D tier.
Yeah, taking Defiled into account, D tier. It's
D for Defiled.
Yeah, and I had a harder time with this one than Defiled Amygdala, and even though I had practice for fighting the Watchdog 2 times before the Defiled dungeon, it didn't matter because it's just that charge. That charge is, I hate it. Because he crosses the entire room in one move, and if you don't sidestep to the left, you're dead. and it's how the amount of times that I have rolled in any other direction or rolled any other direction because I just instinctively misclicked it because it's such a fast thing to predict.
Yeah, so yeah, it is one of those ones where if it's not Defiled, then it's all right, but Defiled is where the real frustration comes in. Okay, so speaking of rolling, there's rolling like a charge attack. Ebrietas, Daughter of the Cosmos. Now, Ebrietas is an optional boss in the main game. For me, I would put her in the God tier category because while admittedly, Ebrietas is, in my opinion, the hardest main game boss. Like, no DLC, she's the hardest boss in the whole game because she's got a lot of HP, really good range of her attacks, and her charge attack, the wiki says, just tank it. Like, the advice is don't dodge, because if you try and dodge in Bloodborne and get hit, you take double damage. Just tank it, and that, I will admit, that's really annoying. But Ebrietas, not only does she have so much different attacks and makes for a really cool boss fight where you can either go in aggressive, wait things out, do various different strategies, but, like, if you ever wanted the epitome of cosmic horror done right, Ebrietas' design is spectacular. You don't know what it is, but it's like, it's grotesque, but it's so beautiful. The music's amazing. The lore. surrounding her is really, she was like, Ebrietas was the great one that they found, and that's where they got the idea to go to explore the fishing hamlet and stuff like that. It's just, Ebrietas is like, it's hard to describe. She's literally this beautiful cosmic entity, despite being a disgusting, grotesque monster. What do you think?
There is something oddly angelic about the design, which I think is why the Lovecraftian works so well, because it's going off of the idea that the one interpretation of angels, that they aren't beautiful, they're actually bizarre and terrifying, but they do have white wings. Yeah. So I really like how it's building off of the Lovecraftian design for that, and also that philosophical idea, and combining them. Yes, I agree. That is the hardest fight in the main game, because that charge, and then also like when it starts shooting magic out at you. For me, I still think the fight is worthy of S tier because of just how cool it is and how tragic it is. It's not in my I don't think it probably doesn't make it. Maybe number 5 for my top 5 list.
Okay.
Not entirely sure, but it's up there. But regardless, it's your list. You can do what you want with your god tier.
All right, I'll put it lower god tier in this case. So yeah, lower god tier, because also there's this one thing about Ebrietas. If she grabs you, insta kill. Literally, she eats you. You can't escape it. Which is something I wonder. She doesn't have a mouth. How does she eat you? Literally, she puts you in her face, and you just like get absorbed in. It's like, how the hell do you even eat us? You don't have a mouth. Weird. Alright, next boss. Alright, last one. The Merciless Watchers. They're literally 3 of the enemies. It's like the whole Shadows of Yharnam thing, except they're 3 big guys. 1 with a gun, 1 with a saw, and 1 with a club. They're whatever. They're a gank, but they're crap. Whatever. I put them in F tier.
Yeah, they're meh.
Yeah,
I'm down for that.
Yeah, that was easy. Okay, so last boss of the main game, and my favorite boss of the main game, Vicar Amelia. I'd put her in god tier because Vicar Amelia, I think for many people, it's the last skill check before deciding whether or not you want to proceed with Bloodborne. Because she's a beast boss that, once again, hyper-aggressive and punishes you for staying at range. She's one of them where you have to find the numbing mist to get past her, which actually isn't that hard to find, but some people miss out and it annoys them. And not only is the design, again, it's horrible but beautiful, like the silky smoothness of her robes and her, her fur, and it's like really angelic, and the cutscene where she mutates into the wolf but she holds the pendant, showing that her humanity is barely holding on. It's such a beautiful thing, and again obviously the music and everything. I love Ebrietas. I love Vicar Amelia. She's my favorite main game Bloodborne boss. And
that's one of those things that I cannot argue with too much at all. Definitely, for non-DLC beast bosses, my favorite as well. I think Amelia does everything a beast boss in Bloodborne should be: aggressive, but not overly aggressive. And the fact that, and people detract, but her healing, I'm just like, you can find numbing mist outside.
Yeah, it's really not.
You find it for a reason.
Yeah.
Just chuck numbing mist at her, and then she does. It's one of those things where it's designed to basically make you think as a player. Use your brain. So I really like that. And you're right. It is the beast boss skill check, because Cleric Beast of the tutorial, the skill check is Amelia. And I'm not even going to argue against absolute god tier for you. S tier for me, but I'm not going to dissuade you whatsoever. I know.
Yeah, thank you. All right, so now for the last 2 bosses for what many consider the best in the game. So starting with Lady Maria. Lady Maria, again, like Gehrman, amazing PvP fight. I love the lore behind it because the Maria fight is so tragic. She was so ashamed of what happened in Fishing Hamlet that she swore to protect it, and also what went wrong with the research hall. And when you fight her, she hates her heritage so much, but in order to stop you, she's willing to enable it. Like she's allowed to do the Cainhurst blood arts, which she despises with all her being, but it's like, I've got to stop you, so I have to reduce myself to this level. The fight itself is, again, extremely anime with the blood splatter and the fire. She's really aggressive, and she's got these really beautiful looking attacks. Granted, if you know how to PvP well, she's not uber hard, but her damage output, I think she has some of the best burst damage in the whole game, where one strike can do 3/4 of your health. And
in phase 3, because it starts with swords and guns, and then it turns into blood, and then at 30% HP, she gets fire. When it's blood plus fire, if her strong attack can just straight up one-shot you. But I like that, because if you get hit by her strong attack, it's your own fault. Because it's very easy to predict. But I like the fact that it's just that her moveset doesn't change. She just becomes more threatening and gets more range on her moves. So I think that's beautiful. You covered everything I like about the lore, and that's the fact that her character flaw is that even though she was so ashamed by the events that were committed that she threw away her swords in life and then committed suicide, her consciousness in the nightmare only exists for the sake of keeping those secrets buried because she's ashamed of the atrocities committed against Kos.
Absolutely.
And then because they committed the atrocity against Kos, because of the atrocity committed against Kos, that caused the fishing hamlet to all be infected and everything went to
absolutely.
shit. So that whole situation is what. So there's a very tragic beauty to it, and the biggest part is it's just a really fun fight.
Absolutely.
It's the other thing. It shares one other thing in common with Gehrman. The run back is like 10 seconds for both fights.
The run back for Lady Maria's like...
You stop at the lamp. Like, Lady Maria is one of the few fights that I have ever got her down to, like, a killing blow on my first try, and then I just stopped attacking, let her kill me, so that way I can do it again, because I'm having that much fun. Now, I haven't done it often, but there are a couple more times where I'm just like, no, I need more, and I literally just let her kill me so I could fight her again.
There's no save states in Bloodborne. It saves every second. So if you do something wrong or if you miss something, that's it. You got to start a new file. But yeah, so would you put it in S tier or God tier?
So for me, it's definitely God tier. Maria is my personal number 2 below Gehrman, and then we know who my number 3 is, and I know who your favorite is. So that's best for last, as it were. So it's up to you.
I'll put it in God tier because again, the lore and stuff like that. I mean, for me, it'd be somewhere between S and God. The only reason being is because, like Gehrman, because I'm a better PvP hunter, I haven't struggled with Maria that much, but I'm not going to deny the difficulty of her fight. And even then, like, when you really go into the lore and how tragic it is, it's really, really incredible just how, like, sad the whole situation is. But now we have not just the best boss in Bloodborne, probably one of the best bosses, or one of the best moments in video game history, Ludwig the Holy Blade and Ludwig the Accursed. Now, Ludwig is amazing because the design of it, well, for those who know, it's a big Berserk reference to that one horse scene. But it's a beautiful, horrible design of this man who's been mutilated into part man, part horse, and he's got this writhing mouth with eyes in it. And when he first fights you, he's a maniacal monster that just bears and neighs at you, and he's really, really hard because again, he's just crazy. In fact, he has this one jump attack that potentially one-shot you. But when you get him down to half HP, his sanity comes back when he gazes upon the Moonlit Greatsword, which also made him lose his sanity, so it's this weird double entendre. And the cutscene, the cinematography, the way he puts his sword in front of his face to show that, thanks to the sword, his humanity is still there. And then the fight changes to a sword fight, and the music kicks in, and it's literally like, looks like Kyle's Buster Sword, and just the whole battle, you get 2 fights in one. It's God tier. It's godder than God tier. What do you think?
In my personal tier list, my top 3 bosses would be in my God tier, and Ludwig absolutely makes the cut. But definitely the best beast boss. The one critique that the only gameplay critique I do have of the first phase is there is one charge attack that I find is that is so fast that I end up getting pinned against the wall and dying, and that's the only deaths against him that don't feel like my fault. But outside of that one nitpick, the fight is flawless from a design standpoint because his moves are there to make sure you can't wail on under him, and although you can't stay out in front of him, you have to be constantly moving, and you have to be repositioning as you're going through. But there are attacks that give you like his beam attack that gives you a very clear window, and then for the sword phase, not only is it epic as fuck, you need to be careful because if you stand in front of him and let him slash you, you're gonna die because his sword takes chunks out of your health bar. You gotta be constantly. If you sidestep when he slashes, you dodge. So it's basically like this rhythm. It turns into this rhythm where it's like you attack, dodge, attack, dodge, attack, dodge. So I really like that. And the other thing that I love is Ludwig is just a combo that I had with him in one fight where I attacked him and he was going to go to raise his sword against me. I pulled out the cannon, shot him in the face with the cannon that did like 1,000 damage, and then I got a riposte off, so I did a quarter of his health in one combo.
God!
And the fact that like because you can stagger Ludwig, it's very hard, but you can, and the cannon's the best way because it's just 1,000 damage right to his face. So I love the fact that it gives you the ability to get a visceral off on him if you. Because him, Ebrietas, and Amygdala, you can all do the cannon
strat. Yeah, the cannon strat.
So so if you're a Berserk fan and you want to become Guts, you can do that in Bloodborne.
Yeah, you can fight the horse monster plus sword. But yeah, it's so beautiful, and again, his story is just amazing. But yeah, so that's the Bloodborne bosses. Again, 5 god tier bosses. Again, a couple, mostly around the CB region, and some crappy ones, but mostly in the fact you've got 5 god tier bosses, that goes to show how good the Souls series is when it comes to boss design.
Yep, yeah. The only thing that really changed on my list is just the order of the god. It's just the order of the god tier. Everything that's in god tier that isn't in mine is going to be in my S tier. So that just comes down to personal preference. But yeah, this is kind of how I feel about the bosses of Bloodborne. The peak of Bloodborne boss design is some of the best FromSoft game he's ever done, but there is a lot of just okay, and that's fine. Because when I play Bloodborne, I think the environments, the atmosphere, and the levels are more what I'm there for than the boss fights outside of the DLC and the ending. Because that's when I'm there for really. Because when I'm playing the DLC, I'm ready for the boss fights. But I actually kind of enjoyed the levels in playing through Bloodborne.
Oh yeah, the levels can be great.
Than the
again, Cathedral Ward and Central Yharnam, brilliant levels.
Yep, and don't worry, in our next segment we will have a lot to say about the levels.
Okay, so quick edit here. We missed 3 bosses during the recording, so I'm quickly going to go over them before we move on to the next segment. Pthumerian Elder I would best describe as Discount Martyr Logarius, as he's primarily using ranged attacks, but will get physical when you come in close. While personally, we find the boss to be pretty straightforward, and a rather fun parry fight if you stick close, this dude can be very stressful given how much coverage certain attacks have, and the fire damage that goes along with it, which in this game is no joke. Otherwise, the Watchdog and Laurence wouldn't make us want to rip our hair out, so like the Descendant, C tier. The bloodletting / headless beast on a technical level is very impressive, as this monster is one of the biggest bosses in the game, which is both the best and worst part of each respective battle. For this fiend's size makes it very easy to get into the blind spots and wail on it. That being said, 2 particular attacks are utter horseshit. The first is where he can cross the entire arena in one punch, and his stomp attack has a bigger hitbox than the Pleasure of Hit check. Neither of us are really a fan to begin with, but even without the cheap moves, he's nothing special, and the maggot head version is just revolting, even by Bloodborne standards, so D tier. Finally, the abhorrent beast can be fought rather early in the Forbidden Woods, and makes for a fantastic NPC, screaming about how hunters are the real monsters, doubly so when you can cheese him without breaking a sweat. But in the Chalice dungeons, though he's rather small for a beast battle, this bloke compensates with exceptional speed, for his smaller frame allows for much faster movement and intensity, almost like a middle ground between a beast and hunter fight. His weakness to poison is very useful and a way to tip the scales in your favour that I find to be unique among most bosses. However, some moves feel a bit cheap, and when running a skill blood tinge build, he gave me so much shit, but defo B tier for sure. Alright, wonderful. Okay, so yeah, now we're going to do the next part of the game, the actual areas in Bloodborne, locations if you will. Obviously not bothering with the Chalice Dungeons. So, obviously, because Bloodborne's a big adventure game, you go to various different locations across all of Yharnam, getting all the more, lethargic, all the more creepy, and all the more, highly questionable as you go along, because the game is very inspired by, Lovecraftian lore and mythology with Victorian vibe. So when we come to ranking the areas, we're mainly going to focus on the level design, how much fun they are to traverse, what lore do they have behind them, the enemies, not so much the boss fight because we've already covered that, and again if we include the boss fight that's going to really elevate certain areas, but yeah, mostly just focusing on the levels themselves. So the one we'll start with, let's begin with the Forbidden Woods. This is one of the big areas of the game. The Forbidden Woods is probably one of the biggest. It's a really big trek, and this is where the game starts transitioning from Victorian horror to Lovecraftian horror, because that's when you got all the snakes and stuff like that, and the Ouroboros and so on. So the area itself, it's really big to traverse, and there's a lot to do there, and it also leads to Byrgenwerth, which is a big part of the game. But it's long, and until you get to the lamppost, it's one of those ones where you're really on edge, because if you die, you've got to trek through the whole thing again, because there's so many enemies, lots of enemy variety, and there's also a really awesome workaround back to Yusuf's Clinic, but this thing goes on for what feels like forever. What do you think?
One of the worst areas in Bloodborne, and it's one of those things where, because it really is two halves, it's a case where it's an area that should have been split into two separate areas with a defined lamp in between, because it turns into a big slog, because the first half, when you're going through the this scary, creepy wooden village vibe, where it's still like Victorian, I actually think it's pretty good, because you're basically just doing a loop around the area, and then getting to a windmill that has an elevator shortcut that leads to the backup. That area was probably pretty solid. The snake part is so long. It's so annoying, because now that we've played the game before, you know exactly where we're going, you know how long you need to go. When you're first playing, it feels like a long trek through eternity, and I think that personally, if that snake area was significantly shortened, I think it would have been for the area's benefit. So one of my absolute least favorite areas.
So where would you put it personally?
Because. It's not the worst, so I'd probably put it in D.
I can agree with that. I agree with you where it says two halves. They should have made the elevator shortcut the lamppost bit, because that feels like the second half of the area.
Yeah, no, I think, because the other problem is, especially if we talk about Byrgenwerth next, is Byrgenwerth is too short.
Yeah. And
that area is too long. You couldn't, there's a very simple solution here. Put the Shadows of Yharnam boss earlier. That is and then make Byrgenwerth bigger and cut down on the snakes.
Yeah, in fact, let's rank Byrgenwerth, because Byrgenwerth, lore-wise, amazing area, because that's where they started doing the research on the Great Ones, putting eyes in their skulls, this, that, and the other. The enemies, that's where you get to see like the weird flymen and the centipede enemies, and you got that one boss that's actually harder, that can be potentially harder than Rom. Here's the thing. The area is literally just a building with a garden outside. It's one of the smallest areas in the game, and because of that, it's really boring to get through. Literally, all you do is you go in, go round, go up, done. It's so unbelievably short, and it feels like it should have been connected to the second half of Forbidden Woods rather than area on itself. But the lore behind it is spectacular, and the atmosphere too.
My issue with Byrgenwerth is that it feels like elements from the lecture building and the research hall should have been a part of Byrgenwerth instead of being separated, because that's what makes Byrgenwerth feel so short. But this is what Byrgenwerth actually has. It has the frenzy fly monsters on the outside. It has a brain sucker, a very annoying brain sucker. And then you go inside and you have the real boss of Byrgenwerth, which is the hunter NPC in there, who's very strong, and then and that's really about it until the boss. So it's just one of those things where it was a disappointment, because you're so used to more content out
bigger
of
areas. Yeah.
And with the other area being too big, it's just I feel like those problems are tied together. I don't dislike it as much as Forbidden Woods though, because I'd rather an area be short and I'd like it more than an area be too long and me just hate myself when playing it. Because the lore is cool, and I really do like the moonlit atmosphere.
I'd put it in D tier, but obviously higher than Forbidden Woods, like a high D.
Yep, I can live with that.
Alright, now next up, let's do Old Yharnam. So Old Yharnam is where you go after you've gone down through the Cathedral Wardens, where you fight the Bloodstock Beast at the end. Old Yharnam is it's quite linear, because you've got to run from a Gatling gun, but it's a kind of cool area. It's mostly just beast enemies and a couple of hunters to fight and some wolves. But I love the charred remains look of it. There's some nice stuff to get, and you really do feel like this was once a thriving part of Yharnam that's literally been burnt to the ground. So it's very desolate in that regard, and it really digs into the Victorian hot, scary nighttime atmosphere. I think it's overall a C tier area.
you for high C or low B, but also now I'm just remembering how there's that one room with all of those beasts who just come after you when you have to funnel through the door. Yeah, C tier. Okay, that just triggered a very annoying memory where unless you have some weapons that are good at dealing with hordes, it's very annoying. So you covered basically everything. I really like the story of Jura though, with a hunter who's so repentant that he's deluded into thinking he's doing the right thing by just letting the beasts wander and then attacking you for just trying to go about your business to like just get through to like the real threat, which is the Bloodstarved. So that part's cool.
Again, his story is very cool because he does tell you, like, again, they actually do, they're not going to harm you, the thing, because the thing about Bloodborne is the more you go into it, the more you realize your hunter's an asshole. Just going around killing everybody.
Yeah. The other interesting tidbit with Old Yharnam is you can choose to not enter Old Yharnam the normal way at all, and then later, because you can get the mark to enter Cathedral Ward and fight Amelia, and then by doing that you can then get captured and go in the back way after beating Paarl. If you do that, Jura will be like, wait, who are you?
Because you don't come around the normal way.
Because you don't fight any beast he doesn't warn you, and you can actually gain his friendship, which is a really cool detail. It's also you have to go really far out of your way to do it, because that takes a lot of planning.
Yeah. Alright, next area. Okay, this is one. So, we're not starting on the best foot, and this one isn't going to help. Nightmare Frontier. This is the designated poison part of the game. It's like, shouldn't the Forbidden Woods be that? No, I mean, Forbidden Woods has poison. This is the designated poison area. You're in this, I will admit, you're in this really weird warped space with all these stone structures where you have to get through a poison swamp with Cthulhian tentacle monsters, trolls throwing boulders, hunter NPCs that can invade you just as NPC characters, not other players. And this is also where you first come into one of the scariest, worst enemies in the game, the fucking Winter Lanterns. The Nightmare Frontier is, if you want to get through it normally, it's not that bad. If you want everything, I hope you stocked up on healing items, because fuck me, it's so annoying.
Yeah, E tier. It's the poison swamp area. It's one of the first places where you can meet the dreaded Winter Lanterns. For those of you who do not know, there are enemies that if they see you, they will give you an ailment called Frenzy, where you lose 80% of your health, and if they grab you successfully, you're dead. Albeit, with experience, you can learn how to parry them, and then you can just tank. You can just iframe the Frenzy. But it doesn't change the fact that those enemies have given me long-term trauma. So, so I still hate them, because the amount of times you miss the parry and you die anyway.
Yeah, so again, it's annoying as hell. There are bits I like of it, and if you go through, if it was just do a standard run, I'd probably put it in D, but when you want everything, especially because you gotta traverse the poison so much, and there's so much fucking poison! Yeah.
Miyazaki likes his poison swamps.
Indeedy so. Alright, next area. Let's go with the old abandoned workshop. This area literally serves no purpose in the whole thing. Even the stuff you get from it serves no massive purpose, but it's really cool. The journey there, while difficult and very, luck-based, it's really cool just to see the inspiration for the hunter's dream. And being able to get the stuff there, you get that reaction from the doll, which is always nice. But it's one of those ones where, so in terms of gameplay, there's nothing to the abandoned workshop, but in terms of lore, it's really interesting. So what do you think?
It's one of those things where it's worth it because you then learn that the Hunter's Dream is a real place that was replicated in the dream world. And that reveal to me, honestly, puts it up to C tier just for like how cool that is. Even though sometimes you don't need to be important, sometimes you don't need to be big, sometimes you just need to do something that wows you. And that's good enough for a neutral from my standpoint, because that's the whole point. The whole point of the area is literally to tell you, the hunter, you're back home, but in reality.
Yeah.
So I like that. I give it props for that.
Okay. Alright, so now for a DLC area, let's do the Research Hall. The Research Hall is one giant vertical climb, and it can be kind of annoying to get up, but it's one of the most horrific areas in the game when you see what happens to all the patients. It's very puzzle-oriented, and obviously, you know, I like the theme of this, like, climbing to the top. You start as, like, at the very bottom where it's disgusting and horrible, but as you get higher and higher and higher, it becomes a bit more ethereal. So in that regard, I think it's really, really cool. It's a bit of a pain, but it's also very symbolic. What do you think of the Research Hall?
Research Hall reminds me of... You don't have this reference point, but I do. Reminds me a lot of Dark Souls level design in the verticality and the fact that you're climbing up and then going back down. I really, really like the Research Hall because there are a couple rooms. I will admit there are a couple rooms that are pretty bullshit. But outside of like those couple rooms, it's just a situation where like the puzzle orient and then the Research Hall for me is what Bergenworth should have been. It should have been this amazingly horrific area that showcases like all of the worst of the experimentation and the folly of humanity trying to reach the heavens really resulted in. Mm-hmm. So for me personally, it's A, but also I can get why some people don't like it for the whole the whole like the enemy design thing. Yeah, because enemy design is important and the enemies are kind of annoying.
Yeah, because also for you, like you said, you have that point of reference with Dark Souls, whereas I don't.
Agreed. So yeah, I can agree with a high B tier from that standpoint.
Right now, Yusefka's Clinic. There's actually the area of the game you start in, but you can also go back round. Now, Yusefka's Clinic is one of those areas where it's a lot of effort to fully explore it, but if you do, while it doesn't, the actual area itself doesn't have anything to it, it's fascinating what happens to Yusefka, what you see go on behind the scenes, but also like how you can, like, depending on when you go, the situation's very different. You can fight Yusefka normally and get a rune, or you can fight her afterwards and get one of the umbilical cords. So in that regard, it's kind of like the Abandoned Workshop for me, maybe a bit better, where there's not much in the area gameplay-wise, but in terms of the lore and what you have to go through, it's pretty spectacular.
For me, the old workshops... the clinic's coolest point is the reveal of the sudden the one mind-blowing interconnectivity part of the world, which is from one point in the Forbidden Woods, you climb up a ladder, a very big ladder that reminds me of Metal Gear, and then you come off, and then you're suddenly at the clinic, like that, and then you realize, and then so that part is really cool to me. The fact that it's like, oh, the Forbidden Woods is if you double back around the Forbidden Woods, you end up underneath Yharnam. So I really liked that aspect. But everything else you covered perfectly. It's one of those places that it's creepy when you go. If you go in the second phase before the Blood Moon, because you're not going for the cord, it's a very surprisingly one of the hardest hunter NPCs. Honestly, it's like if that NPC is like Yosefka is like Wilhelm's Mistress on steroids, basically.
Yeah, essentially.
So there is a challenge there if you want to seek it out. But if you're going for the best ending, if you're going for the true ending, the best is debatable. Going for the true ending, then you won't see it. Yeah. So I can think it's definitely better than the old workshop.
Okay, cool. All right, speaking of creepy. Alright, so I want to talk about the scariest area in the game, Upper Cathedral Ward. Like, Bloodborne for the most part is more creepy than scary. This area is legit scary. Like, when you first go in, you've got this really haunting choir music. You have the weird baby, like, fetuses that aren't kind of like skulking around. And when you get inside, it's filled with brain suckers and werewolves. Now, admittedly, the brain suckers I hate fighting them, but it's so dark, and like around every corner could be an enemy. It's legit terrifying. The area, while it is a pain in the ass to get through, the fear it induces in you just by being so minimalistic is incredible. I would put it in the A tier for that regard, but what do you think?
It's A tier because it's the Lovecraftian Victorian horror games ghost house, and it relishes in it. It knows what it's doing. When you enter Upper Cathedral Ward, it gets misty. You start hearing the theme, and you start seeing people pop out of the fog. And then when you enter the main area, you see werewolves climbing around the chandelier, dropping it, making the whole area go dark. That alone is worthy of A tier because you have feral beasts with you. You can't see them, and they know you're there. Terrifying. And not to mention the whole cosmic horror aspect with the choir and all the shit they've been up to, turning themselves into the annoying blue goobers, and then the brain suckers. Really, really cool.
Yeah, very good. It's legit terrifying part of the game. All right. Now the lecture building. The lecture building it's an interesting idea, but it feels very undercooked because there's not that many enemies, there's not that many places to go, and while it's a really neat concept and you can see what happened to Byrgenwerth, it feels like they really didn't go as far as they could to really explore this area and see just the extent of how, because Byrgenwerth is meant to be a huge thing in the Bloodborne universe, but they don't do much with it. So I think it's either C or D. Because, again, the idea is there, but it feels very underutilized.
Yeah, Yeah, I think C or D, whatever your preference is. Because I like the idea of it being the area in the Nightmare that connects the frontier and the Nightmare of Mensis. And I like the fact, and I like the rule, that lore rule it signifies, where it showcases how just part of Byrgenwerth got sucked into the Nightmare, but still,
Yeah, I put it in D.
It's kind of meh. Also, the enemies are just very, very weird.
Yeah, they're like weird slug things, these giants, and that's about it. And Patches is there, and that's something. And it is the first place that you get a mat, like, this is one of the umbilical cords you can't miss.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Right, next. Alright, so I think this is definitely S tier. Central Yharnam. This is the starting area of the game. This is how you do a brilliant tutorial without being a tutorial. You have everything. You've got the level design, which, while linear, splits off into various pathways. You can go to areas early and know what you do, and it gives you room to explore. You've got every type of enemy needed to learn the mechanics of the game, from trolls to beastmen to dogs, this, that, and the other. You can get extra weapons. You can find NPCs. You can fight optional bosses. It's big and spread out, but not so much that you can get lost easily. It introduces you steadily to the what Bloodborne's all about. It's so good.
Yeah, Central Yharnam is one of the 3 areas that I would put in my S tier list, and it is straight up my favorite area in the game. It is the peak of Bloodborne's level design and it's my favorite level 1 in any FromSoft game that they come out with. Because while it's a good extra tutorial, the area 0, which is that teaches you how to hit things, that's technically the clinic. For the first level where you have free agency to basically go about however you want, you have the weapons, you can explore and then learn how to play the game, like in a practical setting.
Yeah.
Best one. So it's and also, like, that is the peak of. There is no cosmic whatsoever. This is literally just Victorian horror, and that's also something I love. I love how it just relishes in the Victorian for it and doesn't even hint at the cosmic.
Another village area, but in my opinion, not a very good one. Yahar'gul, the Unseen Village. This is what you get once the Blood Moon, after beating Rom and the Blood Moon rises. Honest to God, it's essentially Central Yharnam again, but worse, because it's even more linear. The enemies are just Yharnamites, which at this point of the game is boring as fuck. There's the giant Cthulhu monsters which spam lasers at you, which can be annoying to dodge if you don't know the pattern, and also you get spammed with hunter NPCs that like gank you, and it's really annoying. And also you have the Bell Maidens, which are also annoying. This area is just annoying. Like, also, it's a retread of areas you've been, because you actually go here when you get abducted by the people with the sacks. But yeah, again, the area is just like if you take the whole thing into account, and if you encounter the stuff before you fight Paarl, it's kind of cool. But it just feels like, again, it feels like this area should have been earlier in the game. It's one of the things where it's like we're heading towards the end game, and it feels like we're retreading old ground.
Not only are you retreading old ground, you're also retreading it's cheap design, because they just make the enemies have more health, and the enemies just hit harder. And there are two other comments I'd like to make on this. First comment: the 3 hunter NPCs in the church area, like where the jail lantern was. Fuck those NPCs. Because hunter NPCs when they gank you that's not how the game is designed. When you're fighting two at once, because the gameplay really is like if you're fighting groups of enemies, you're fighting a big beast, or you're fighting one solo hunter. Shines in all three. Fighting multiple hunters, it's not fun at all. So I just don't bother anymore, and I just lure them out in front of the big Amygdala that's firing lasers and let them get lasered.
Yeah,
that is how little fucks I give about them at this point. So it loses points for that, and even in the two things it does get points for, when you get down to the bottom half and you see what happened to the people from the ritual with all the corpses melded into the wall, that is fucking freaky. Yeah. So it gets points for the freakiness, and then you see the results of it with the One Reborn, but that lower section just isn't good enough to justify like the retread enemies above. And the other thing is, it's not on this list, but it says a lot that I like the first time you go at night more, because there's no retreaded enemies, and when you're there, it has the really cool ethereal chanting song.
Yes.
So I put this in C tier.
Do you put it in C? I would put it in I was actually going to put it in E, but how about D?
Okay, D. Oh, you're gonna put it in E. Oh, okay.
Because again, I think it's really if we just look at Yahar'gul, I think the whole retread just feels really lazy. And again, the fucking Bell Maidens, man. Bell Maidens are annoying.
So the reason why I put it in C from my end is because I was including the Hypogean Gel experience, the gel, because it wasn't separate. So I think D works then because that works because it's a C tier experience and then an E tier experience, so together it's a D. So that works.
Alright, so another DLC area, the Fishing Hamlet. The Fishing Hamlet, very creepy atmosphere. Level design wise, it's kind of cool. Granted, it can be a bit of a clusterfuck, especially towards the end where you've got to go in the different huts and there's just tons of enemies. Color scheme wise, obviously it's very blue and a bit boring, but at the same time it's meant to be like that. It really gives off not only just a horror aspect, but a cosmic horror too, but very much just a really, really almost like a Pirates of the Caribbean, that type of Davy Jones type thing, where the sea life is taken over and it's just so miserable. The enemy variety, solid, but the sharks are a massive pain in the ass. And for lore purposes, it's really, really fascinating. I think it's a good area overall, not one of my favorites, but good.
As I was saying, my favorite... I really like Fishing Hamlet for being so unique in terms of everything else Bloodborne has. It's a completely brand new area, completely new aesthetic. Yeah, the David Jones the sea overtaking with the Pirates of the Caribbean stuff. You can. I haven't read the novel, but I know that there is a Lovecraftian novel that is basically all about a village that became overrun with sea monsters. Mm-hmm. So the inspiration is clearly that. I personally think the Fishing Hamlet is fantastic. The beginning section where there's all the enemies at the start, that can get a little annoying. So probably A tier for those reasons. Mm-hmm. But overall, just the sheer unique factor and the fact that in the atmosphere being so oppressive, it's the most depressing atmosphere in the entirety of Bloodborne.
Yeah, and that says a lot.
So I would put it in A tier for those reasons. Yeah, okay. Because it goes up because. It builds up the orphan fight extremely well. Mm-hmm. That's the other thing. It really, really does.
Cool. Alright, cool. So so that one was that. So now we've got... there's only one more DLC area. Let's go with the Healing Church Workshop. Now, the Healing Church Workshop, that's when you go up from Cathedral Ward, up to Upper Cathedral Ward. It's that tower area and everything down below. It's not a bad area, to be honest. Again, it's more of a transition between the big areas, from Healing Church to Aether, the old workshop, or Upper Cathedral and stuff. But there's some cool stuff there. If you go to the bottom, you can go around the back and end up somewhere else. I think, I can't remember where it is exactly you end up, but you end up somewhere in Cathedral Ward, I believe. And then there's some cool stuff. There's some cool stuff. You also go around the back areas. There's that one brain sucker that sucks ass, literally. But yeah, it's overall it's a transitional area. I'd put it in C tier because that's what it is. It's a transition.
Yeah, but I can agree with that. So where you end up is if you go to the very bottom, that's where you fight the one corn demon beast monster. I forget its name.
Yes.
You fight them, and then you're on the bottom back streets of Cathedral Ward that leads you right around where you run into the place where you find the NPCs you can send to the Odeon Chapel. So you end up, and then basically. It's designed so if you don't want to spend your echoes on to open the gate, you can go around the back way by going in that way to enter Cathedral Ward in a different direction, which I really like. So solid transition area. Solid transition.
Right. Another transition area, if you will, the Hunter's Workshop. Now, in terms of gameplay, the Hunter's Workshop, aside from the boss fight Gehrman, offers nothing. It's meant to be the hub where you're meant to go and, rest up, upgrade your materials, do challenge dungeons, that and the other. It's so beautiful. The white flower field, the music, especially when you get over 40 insight and you can hear the doll singing. Just interacting with the doll. While the area doesn't have much to explore, the etherealness of it all, it's especially in a game like Bloodborne, it's indescribable. I know a lot of people love this area, even though from a gameplay point of view, it literally does nothing. But having that break from such an oppressive, horrible world, and to come back to, the doll, to come back to Gehrman, to come back to just this white field of white and beauty. I wouldn't put it in S because, again, gameplay-wise, it doesn't have enough going for it. But I would put it in A tier because it is so beautiful and such a relief.
That song alone is worth the placement in A tier. So I agree, A tier, because it's not my favorite hub area that FromSoft has made, but it is one of the best, and that is enough.
Yeah.
And it's really enough because FromSoft is very good at nailing the sort of the safe zones, as you will, and they all fit really well into the respective games. So, and the Hunter's Workshop is no exception.
And it makes for a beautiful area to fight the final boss in.
Agreed.
Yeah, it looks very good. All right, so the last of the Nightmare areas, the Nightmare Mensis. Now, this one is interesting. There's a lot of stuff that's annoying, but at the same time, it is really cool. It's got this very warped, again, it's a brilliant merging of the Lovecraftian Victorian, because the interior is very Victorian, the exterior is very Lovecraftian. It's got lots of enemy variety, granted. You have the brain of Mensis nailing you with frenzy. You've still got winter lanterns. You've got giant fuck-off spiders, and you've got crows with dog heads and dogs with crow heads, because why not? But outside of that, it's a pretty cool area to explore. Again, it really gives off this haunted mansion type vibe, and it's really interesting. Oh yeah, go ahead.
I really wish this tier list separated the Hunter's Nightmare in half, because Nightmare of Mensis in half. Yeah. Because my God, because this is hurting my brain trying to decide now. Because basically, you have what I consider the Hunter's Nightmare is everything from the start through Micolash.
Yes.
Through Micolash, that's the Hunter's Nightmare. Then everything after Mergo's Loft middle is the Lantern to the top with Mergo's Loft. And that's also then including the bridge with the Winter Lantern Bridge, which is but still, and then the Brain. That section I consider its own area.
Yeah, most
so
people do,
I'm going to analyze
them.
I'm going to analyze them separately, and then for the sake of the tier list, I'm just going to average them because I think that's going to make this easier. So the Hunter's Nightmare, it's the outside through Micolash. You're right. The aesthetic's amazing. I fucking hate playing it.
Yeah,
because
pelted with frenzy.
Because it's a stealth level. You literally go from shade to shade to not get frenzied, and then you have people throwing rocks at you. Then you go inside and be away from the frenzy, and then you have literally a spider army.
And one of those spiders is huge.
That room, I cannot imagine the amount of people who have arachnophobia who have seen that room and just fainted on the sight.
You know what's hilarious? Again, I don't mean to do the whole gender stereotype thing, but I just noticed that women tend to be more scared of spiders than men are. I reckon it's again. There's a woman playing Bloodborne. She gets that bit. Nope. Just drops the controller.
Anyone who has arachnophobia is just gonna be like, nope. Friend, do this room for me.
Yeah.
because here's the thing. I don't mind spiders in games that much. It's just the fact that these ones are just annoying to deal with because you basically have to go into a hallway and fight the one at a time, and then fight the big one last. And it's not the most enjoyable experience. And then also those really weird jester enemies. I don't even know what they're called.
Well, yeah, because they unless they're the big ones. They're
the ones with have the toxic crossbows. The enemies that are in Micolash's fight even like. Those look very weird. Bloodborne is odd in general, but those enemies are just unsettling in some way because of the masks. Yeah, so personally, I put the Nightmare in E.
Okay.
The Nightmare in E. Now Mergo's Loft, that's what makes this complicated, because Mergo's Loft I actually probably put in B or A, because it's the best farming route in the game, unless you're doing the challenge, unless you're doing, like, layer 4.
Yeah, because you've got the pigs and the shadows that become normal enemies, the winter lanterns, they drop really good blood gems, and it's also where you can destroy, it's where you can go down and get to the, not only deactivate the Brain of Mensis, but it's also where you can visit the Brain of Mensis and get the rune from it if you do the whole make contact gesture.
Yep, which then feeds into the loop of getting, because here's the thing, because it's not necessarily for level grinding, it's also just making sure you have enough vials to take on the DLC. So so from a functionality standpoint, that area, because when the first time through it's a little daunting, but once you understand how to farm it, it's really, really useful. Overall, that together I have to put it in C tier, just the average.
I agree. If you
because it's one of those things where because even in Mergo's Loft, you still have the bell ringing woman, which are very annoying. Like,
yeah.
It's a nightmare level. They made it dickish for a reason, and that doesn't mean I have to like it.
Yeah, I agree with you where Mergo's Loft is way better than Nightmare of Mensis. I don't think Mensis is as bad as Frontier, but it's still not that great. But Mergo's Loft is very, very cool. It's a bit short. But yeah, both those areas combined would be C. But if you put Mergo's Loft like separately, Mergo's Loft would be A, B, and I think just to make it easy, Mergo's Loft would be B, Nightmare Mensis would be D.
I could live with that.
Yeah.
So I can live with that assessment.
Alright, so next area. Hemwick Charnel Lane. Ooh, man, this area is pretty forgettable. It's very grey. The enemies are pretty standard Yharnamites and trolls. Again, the boss at the end is the freaking Witch of Hemwick. The dogs are annoying. The executioner's alright. The level design is basic. Again, it's one of the most basic bitch areas in the whole game, which for Bloodborne is kind of disappointing.
There's something odd. I enjoy playing through Hemwick, even though I know I shouldn't. Because everything you said is valid, but maybe it's just something about just grabbing my threaded cane and just tearing into all the Yharnamites or something. But it's just, but there's just something odd. It's also, I like the horror vibes are very good there.
Yeah, very.
Because it reminds.
Very like Wicker Man. Very Wicker Man. Yeah, very Wicker Man.
Yeah, it looks like you're going into a witch's den. Which I wish the witch was better, but it feels like you're going to a witch's den. So I don't really know how to feel about this one. Where are you gonna put it to start?
I was thinking, because again, it's inoffensive, but I was thinking more so C tier, because while it's not special, again, it's like a stress-free area. There's nothing about it that's outright bad, aside from the final boss, but again, it's just not that interesting either.
Yeah, I can live with that, but it is an area that I always go to before going to the Forbidden Woods.
Oh yeah, I do.
Like as soon as I turn it to night, I always go that way. Because it's an optional area, but it has the rune tool, which means it's a not required area if you want to not hate yourself later on.
Yeah. Okay.
So it's like one of those things where it's.
All right. Yeah. So next is the Hunter's Nightmare. This is the first area in the Nightmare DLC. This area is so interesting because, for one thing, it's an area in Bloodborne that takes place in the daytime, which, again, it's rare in Bloodborne. But the level design, it's so beautiful because it's what you took. If you took Cathedral Ward and Central Yharnam and used polymerization, that's it. The imagery is so warped and distorted. The level design, it's very like it's a bit more open because you can go up, down, and all around. You see the hunters fighting the demons, and you see how blood drunk they are. There's pools of blood everywhere. The structures are melding in on themselves. You see, like, the blood-starved beast when he's not blood-starved, and it's actually really easy. I will admit, the area can definitely feel over-congested because you've got people on turrets that are annoying. You've got blood lickers that are annoying. You've got this Gatling gun dude who's really annoying. But even then, just everything that's there, the pools of blood, it's an absolute mess. But I like how it symbolized the absolute insanity of the hunter's nightmare dream at that point, where there were so many hunters and the whole place is just literally an absolute clusterfuck. So in that regard, I love it because it's a perfect symbolism of the time period.
It's one of those cases where it's retreading. It's the rare case of retreading an old area with old assets that is done so well because it's not using it for the sake of, like, ease of use. It's doing it for the sake of storytelling, and that makes it brilliant. The other thing that I adore is the fact that if you don't interfere, you get to watch the hunters do their work. And that is... like, having them on a set pattern to hunt down beasts is... just so brilliant that that's part of the reason why I put it in my S tier. No question. It's that I
put it in S tier as well. Another thing I love is this one detail where when you're running along, one of the people from Witch's Hamlet just drops from the sky, but it gives you a really, really clever hint about what's to come because you literally have to ascend up the research hall through the clock tower in order to get it. It's like an angel descending from heaven, but the context is really disturbing.
I definitely enjoy. I definitely really enjoy the Hunter's Nightmare, especially because the weapons in the Hunter's Nightmare are feasible to get early if you know what you're doing. You can dodge effectively. Because you may not be leveled for it, may have the weapons for it.
Yeah, well,
but you can get up to Ludwig. Do you want to fight Ludwig low level? Have fun, you're gonna die, but you can.
Yeah. But you can get the weapons like the beast scythe and the blood, the beast cut, the blood, what's it called? Hold on, I've actually got it on here. It's, the beast cutter, that's it, the beast cutter.
It's the beast cutter, the boom hammer, and the whirlwind skull. Oh, you can also get the Amygdala arm. That one's there as well. You just have to dodge the blood-filled beast.
The blood. Yeah, he's not starved this time.
Yep. But you. So it front loads half the weapons of the DLC in an area that you can get before hitting the stat wall, which I like as well. So that way you can do a full run of Bloodborne with a DLC weapon after you defeat Amelia, which I really like. So it gives major points.
So speaking of Amelia, Cathedral Ward. Now, Cathedral Ward is basically the main point of Bloodborne that you'll go back to the most because it connects to the most areas. Cathedral Ward is fantastic in that regard because it branches off into various pathways. Enemy variety is wonderful. Lore and everything is really, really good too. Granted, I don't feel it's I find Central Yharnam and, the Hunter's Nightmare more fun, but as a central point in the game, especially because that's where you rescue a lot of people, as a central point of the game, it's really clever because it's easily connected to all the pathways you need to go. It does a nice job of introducing new enemies that will teach you about, parry windows, the giant enemies you've got to fight, the ones that can't be staggered that easily, and also, the idea of interacting with certain NPCs and what decisions you make. Really good in that regard, and it's here where you meet many of the NPCs and do their quest line. So it works really well as, a central hub area.
Yeah, that basically is my opinion on Cathedral Ward. It is a really good central hub. It's not even okay, anything is technically a step down for Central Yharnam, but the quality doesn't feel like a step down. It feels like the same level of quality, just without the level of intricacies of Central Yharnam. But if anything, having enemies that if you should have a parry window that's their entire attack animation is brilliant because it teaches you how to parry. So that alone is worth it. And then because you're right, because I was thinking about it, it connects to so many areas that because you access so many different places from it. So yeah.
So S tier as well.
Yeah, I think it's probably probably going to be my personal lowest thing in S, but definitely yes,
I'm the same.
Because it's one of the Bloodborne for me peaks in the first early game, and then the DLC it peaks again, and then the final boss of Gehrman it peaks again. So it's kind of like a sine wave.
Well, speaking of peeking, the last area to talk about, the Forsaken Cainhurst Castle. Now, this is an optional area that can actually be a bit of a pain in the ass to get. But if you get there, I'd say next to Central Yharnam, favorite area in the game. Now, granted, if you're running a skill build, you have to go to Cathedral Ward because you have to go to Cainhurst because the stuff they give you. But first and foremost, the design it goes full in on the castle aesthetic. It's glamorous but also broken. The snow aesthetic is amazing. The interior is dark but really, really glamorous and really, really interesting. The enemies there, while they're a bit more of the unique variety, like the gargoyle enemies and the bloodlickers, the weapons you get, oh my god, you get the Micolash and the Shikage, which if you're running a skill or blood team build will be your best friends ever. Master Logarius is an amazing boss. The lore behind the Vile Bloods and all that stuff, the queen you visit, and how it connects to Alfred's quest line. The whole area, it feels like you've gone into kind of like its own world. Like, obviously, Bloodborne's all interconnected, but Cainhurst feels like it's its own narrative that's being played out compared to other parts of the game which just add on to each other. I absolutely adore it in that regard.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you covered basically everything. There's something about snow levels, man. Something about those snow levels, because it's a snow level that's also done, but the snow is being used to showcase the sense of like melancholy and also, but like a sense of pristine beauty in seeing what's left and preserved.
Yeah.
I think that's the best way to describe it. Because inside, then it's like a spooky ghost house with literal ghosts that scream at you, with their heads locking off their own heads, everything about Cainhurst is wonderful and absolutely worth looking. If you're doing Bloodborne for the first time and you're about to beat the game and you haven't found it, use a guide to find it.
Absolutely, and you'll probably not have that hard of a time against Logarius.
Oh, if you're ready for Gehrman, Logarius probably won't be.
So I wouldn't put it again. I'd put it as my second favorite purely because I think Central Yharnam from a design standpoint is better.
Yep. Yeah. For my for the top, my S tier for areas is the same as your in terms of ordering actually. Because and it's just what it is. It just goes to show that like why Central Yharnam. You could break down Central Yharnam for 2 hours as to why it's brilliantly designed. You could do an entire video essay about Central Yharnam, but and honestly, you can do the same for you can do the same for Cainhurst and then Hunter's Nightmare. Like those three, you can literally break it down to like a science.
You know what you should do?
Work so well, but. Yeah, that's why I take
if you want a full breakdown on why it's so good, just ask Super Eye Patch Wolf to make a video about each area. He could do it. So that's the areas of Bloodborne. Mostly good. Again, we had 1 shit level, 4 meh, 5 pretty solid, 2 damn good, 3 very, very good, and 4 fantastic. And this goes to show because this is an aspect of Souls I think people overlook, that, people know the games for being hard in the boss fights, but there's one thing Bloodborne, and especially Dark Souls 1, excels in its level design. Exploring the worlds of these and interacting with the levels is probably the best parts of the game, even more so than the boss fights and stuff like that. And I feel it's a part of the Souls that gets overlooked just because of how domineering the difficulty in fights are.
Yep, I am inclined to agree. Because barring Poison Swamp Hell and a Frenzy Nightmare Hell, I don't have nothing truly makes me angry when playing Bloodborne because the areas are well designed. Just those 2 areas are very cheap for me. Yeah, which is understandable.
Absolutely. But anyway, so we're actually going to call it here today because we don't want the video to go on for too long. We will be back with a Bloodborne video in the future. We actually want to do weapons and a bit of a fashion show when it comes to the armor sets. But big thank you for everyone for watching. I hope you enjoyed it, and just like I hope everyone who's playing Elden Ring is having a great time. And if you are interested in Bloodborne or Souls, please, this game is cheap to get. There's tons of tutorials, there's breakdowns by big Soulsborne YouTubers about this game, and trust me, once it clicks, you will adore this game. It's so good. So huge thank you to Azure Abysswalker for joining me on this video and being the one to inspire this whole thing in the first place. Really appreciate it, man.
You are quite welcome, my friend, and thank all of you for watching and enjoying this video, and for having me along for the ride.
Yeah, and again, you do stream. We're at one point streaming Bloodborne on your channel, but you do stream a lot of Souls related stuff. So if you are interested, please go to his Twitch because there's quite if you're into Souls content, or just other games too, because you also do Fire Emblem, Bravely, and other stuff.
Thank you, sir. Yes, at some point this year, Bloodborne with Blazing Knight will return. I don't know when, but this video after Elden Ring hype passes probably. So stay tuned.
I want to go back to Bloodborne as well. Dude, yeah, because again, it's been overdue. I didn't play Bloodborne all of last year, though. To be fair, it's probably because during 2020 and 2019 I wouldn't stop playing the game. I platinumed it for a reason, people.
You're not wrong.
Oh boy. Yeah, but anyway, so we thank you all so much for watching. Please be sure to like, subscribe, follow Azure on his Twitch channel, links in the description, and other social media too. And yeah, so we'll see you all next time. But anyway, that's it from me. I will see you all next time. And of course, I want to say a very special thank you to Wolffox, Shadow Dragon, Lucina21, Degenerate Peach, K-Dog, Chaos Sabereye, Vincent Clark, Midnight Castle, Maggieful, Patanka Fan 32, Jeremy Redinger, Farinate392, Daniel Hodgson, Twisted Scarecrow, Cameron Reynolds, and finally Zenny Dragon. Thank you all so much. I love and appreciate you guys. You're the absolute best. Thank you, thank you, thank you.